Alright, y'all. It's 1994. You flip on the TV, and there's Shawn Kemp, one of the most explosive athletes in the NBA, getting the ball stolen from him by Queen Latifah. She lays it in at the other end. The crowd goes absolutely nuts. And you're sitting there thinking, what on earth am I watching right now? That was Rock N Jock. And if you know, you know. And if you don't know, well, you're about to. Alright, let's set the scene for anybody watching this who wasn't around in the early 90s, because you genuinely need the context to understand how wild this thing was. So it's 1990. MTV's not just a channel, it's a cultural institution. Like if you were between the ages of 12 and 25, MTV was like basically the air that you breathed. It dictated what music you listened to, what clothes you wore, what was cool and what wasn't. And the people running MTV knew they had something special. So they started asking themselves a very important question. What else can we do with this platform besides play music? The answer they came up with was so simple, it almost sounds like a joke. What if we got famous musicians and actors and put them on a baseball field with real professional athletes? And that's it. That's the pitch. A charity softball game with rock stars and jocks. They dubbed the first one the Rock N Jock Diamond Derby, and it aired in January of 1990. The name got changed to the Rock N Jock Softball Challenge the following year, and then, because the softball game was a hit, they added basketball in 1991 with the Rock N Jock B-Ball Jam. Eventually, they even tried football and bowling later in the decade, though we'll get to why those didn't quite land the same way. But here's what you really need to understand about what made Rock N Jock different from just a regular celebrity game. It was produced with MTV's sensibility. It wasn't buttoned up, it was loud and chaotic and self-aware and funny. The basketball version had special shots worth 25 points. They later added a 50-point shot. They had farm animals in the outfield during softball, like actual live farm animals just wandering around back there. Because somebody in a production meeting said, but what if we put goats in the outfield? And apparently nobody in that room said no. And God bless them for it. The broadcasting team wasn't your standard sports announce crew. They had sportscaster Steve Albert alongside comedian Ken Ober calling the action, and later Bill Bellamy and Dan Cortez hosting, which meant the whole thing felt more like a party than a broadcast. Now let me tell you about who showed up to that very first game in 1990, because the roster alone tells you everything about what MTV was going for. So you had MC Hammer, who at that exact moment in time might have been the most famous person in America, or at least in the top 3. You had Kevin Costner, who just had done Bull Durham and was riding high as Hollywood's golden boy. You had Corbin Burnson, who everybody knew from LA Law. You had a young Keanu Reeves, who was not yet Neo, not yet John Wick, just some guy who was in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and apparently he was willing to play charity softball, which honestly, let's respect. The first game told you exactly what the formula was going to be. Take musicians at the top of the charts, actors at the top of the box office, and mix them in with real athletes. Not B-list filler, not, oh, that's kind of a famous person, I might have saw him in that show. Like, we're talking about people who were on magazine covers, people whose names you would recognize anywhere. As the years went on, the names just got bigger and more absurd. Pamela Anderson showed up. George Clooney was there, already a year into ER, already one of the most recognizable faces on television. Pauly Shore, Roseanne Barr were on the same team at one point, which is either a comedy writer's dream or their worst nightmare. Honestly, maybe both. You had Tommy Lee, Heather Locklear, Richie Sambora, Salt-N-Pepa, Ice Cube, Snoop Dogg. You had the kind of lineup that today would cost somebody $100 million to assemble, and MTV was just doing it every year. But if the softball game was the foundation of Rock N Jock, then the basketball game is what built the house. The Rock N Jock B-Ball Jam debuted in 1991, and it hit the ground running with an absolutely stacked roster that somehow made the softball game look conservative. Luke Perry was there, and in 1991, Luke Perry was basically like a god to a significant portion of the American population, thanks to Beverly Hills 90210. Will Smith showed up. Mark Wahlberg, still going by Marky Mark at the time, not only played in the game, but performed Good Vibrations at halftime, and in what has become one of the most legendary Rock N Jock moments, took his pants off mid-performance. The producer on record said Marky Mark actually had real game on the court too, which somehow makes the whole thing better. Leonardo DiCaprio was there. Again, Leonardo DiCaprio was at this thing. Donnie Wahlberg, Jaleel White, Steve Urkel himself on the basketball court. You can't write this stuff. And the athletes weren't just showing up to be props. They were competing. Reggie Miller, who never in his life passed up the chance to be the most intense person in any room, apparently took Rock N Jock seriously. Spud Webb was there, Dan Marley, Ron Harper, Shawn Kemp. The same Shawn Kemp, who was one of the most ferocious dunkers in the NBA at the time, was out there playing alongside Queen Latifah, who, by the way, was not there to be decorative. She was competing. That clip of her stealing the ball from Kemp and laying it up is real, and it's a thing of beauty. Later years brought in Shaquille O'Neal, Gary Payton, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. David Duchovny played in one of the games wearing a jersey with the number X on the back, which is either the most on-brand thing imaginable or the second most on-brand thing imaginable after Marky Mark's pants situation. And the key thing, the thing that made it feel real, was that the celebrities weren't always good. Sometimes they were bad. Sometimes they were hilariously, embarrassingly bad. And watching a famous person struggle to field a ground ball or brick a wide open layup has kind of an appeal to it that never really gets old. It humanizes them. It makes them seem like actual people and not just images on a screen. But then you also get moments where someone surprised you, where an actor turned out to have a legitimate jump shot, or a rapper made a play that a real athlete couldn't have done better. And those moments hit different because you weren't expecting them. One of the most genuinely funny stories that came out of the whole series is Derek Jeter, then a young shortstop, this was 1997 by the way, one of the most buttoned up professional athletes of his generation, who convinced the opposing team to let him play catcher even though his team was up to bat. And then, once he was back there, he just started deliberately throwing the ball into the outfield to let his teammates score. Jeter, Derek Jeter, throwing games and having the time of his life. That game also featured A-Rod, Salt-N-Pepa, and Method Man, which is a sentence that could only exist in 1997. And then there's the moment someone traded Bobby Bonilla, a 6-time MLB All-Star, mid-game to the other team because he was underperforming at a celebrity charity softball game. Dan Cortez just walked out there and traded him for Salt-N-Pepa, and Bobby Bonilla went along with it. That was the spirit of Rock N Jock right there. That one moment captures everything. The 4th annual B-Ball Jam was nominated for a Daytime Emmy Award for Outstanding Game Show in 1995. It did lose to Jeopardy, which look, Jeopardy's a great show, but I think we all know which one was more fun. So here's where the story starts to get a little sad if you love this thing the way that I do. So Rock N Jock didn't end because of one dramatic moment. There was no big scandal, no production catastrophe, no falling out that got written up in the trades. It just faded, and that's almost worse in a way. A few things conspired against it. The first is that MTV moved on. As the late 90s turned into the early 2000s, the network was chasing a different audience with a different kind of programming. When the network stopped caring about it, the production energy reflected that. The second problem was expansion. When they tried to extend the format to football and bowling, it didn't land the same way. Softball and basketball worked because they're relatively low impact. You can see the celebrity's face, you can see their expressions. Things happen at a pace where the entertainment value is obvious. Football is a different beast. The game is harder to follow casually, and the risk of someone actually getting hurt goes up significantly. And bowling, bowling is great, but it's tough to build the same kind of crowd energy around a bowling alley that you get from a basketball arena. The third issue is that celebrity culture started to change. The loose, spontaneous, we're all just having fun spirit that had defined Rock N Jock required a certain kind of celebrity who wasn't afraid to be seen as a regular person. As celebrity became more of a brand and less of a personality, that spirit got rarer. The last official Rock N Jock events happened in the early 2000s, and they didn't go out with a bang. No farewell special, no retrospective, no one last game for old time's sake. They just quietly stopped happening. And a lot of people who loved the show didn't even realize it was over until they were already looking back at it from a distance. But here's what time does. It has a way of clarifying what actually mattered. Rock N Jock is gone, has been for over 2 decades, and yet people still talk about it. The oral history that Complex published back in 2015 got shared everywhere. YouTube clips of the best moments still rack up views from people who weren't even alive when those games were played. What Rock and Jock figured out before anyone else had articulated it clearly is that fans want to see famous people be human. And every event you see today that puts celebrities in athletic competition owes something to what Rock and Jock built. The MLB All-Star Celebrity Softball Game, the NBA All-Star Weekend Celebrity Game, every charity tournament where athletes and entertainers mix it up, they all carry a little bit of Rock and Jock DNA, even if they don't know it, even if they'd never say it out loud. So here's the question I keep coming back to. Could Rock and Jock work today? On paper, everything's in place. You got YouTube and streaming platforms that could host something like this at a massive scale. You got athletes with social media followings in the tens of millions who already know how to perform for a camera. You got musicians who cross over into acting, actors who make music, rappers who own sports teams. The boundaries between entertainment and athletics are more blurred right now than they've ever been before. You'd need to be someone willing to risk being the next Bobby Bonilla, getting traded mid-game for Salt-N-Pepa by a guy in a bandana, and just laugh about it. And I hope these people still exist. I mean, I think they do, but they're rarer than they used to be. If you grew up watching Rock and Jock, I want to hear about it in the comments. Tell me more about your favorite memory, your favorite moment, the name that surprised you the most when you saw him on the field. And if this is your first time hearing about any of this, do yourself a favor and go find the clips on YouTube. You'll understand immediately. Subscribe if you want more deep dives like this one, and drop a comment telling me which celebrity from this list would have been the most fun to watch. I'll see y'all in the next one.